Hi, everyone, and welcome to Groaning. I am Danielle, and I'm super excited to be sharing with you the message that the Lord has laid on my heart today. I'm going to be reading from Deuteronomy 28, and I'm just going to be reading the very first verse, so it's very simple today. So Deuteronomy 28, verse 1 says, "If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on the earth." And as I was reading this, I was immediately struck by the choice of words that the author chose, right? It wasn't just if you obey the Lord your God and follow his commands. It was if you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow his commands I give you today, then the Lord your God will bless you and place you high above all the nations on the earth. And so I am often struck by the reality that simple words often pack a big punch if you choose a different word to replace it. So I'm going to be replacing the word fully and then carefully with a few choice synonyms to kind of really bring the point across. So it says, if you fully, so another word for fully is completely or wholly or totally or thoroughly, without reservation, without exception, utterly and in every respect, obey the Lord your God and carefully, another word for that is deliberately or cautiously, follow all his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will bless you. So it's not just you need to be obedient. You need to be fully obedient. You need to be totally obedient. You need to be completely obedient. You need to be thoroughly obedient. You need to be so obedient that it's without reservation. It's without exception. You're so obedient to God's commands that there is no gray area. And if you are completely obedient to his commands and are careful, that means you're deliberately, it's a choice now. It's not just the command is here and I'm going to kind of sort of follow it. It's I'm going to fully obey the commandment and I'm going to be deliberate about my choice. And so as I read that, I realized that it is interesting that God reveals something about us in this very simple passage. He is telling us that the decision to worship, the decision to be his disciple, the decision to be a follower of Christ and a believer in God is a choice. It's something that is unnatural to who we are as humans. You have to make the decision to go about following God because it is not something that we want. And if you think about today's society, obedience is kind of a dirty word. In some ways, it means that you are making yourself smaller to someone else. And if I'm going to be smaller for somebody else, I would much rather be smaller to Jesus than I am to anybody else. We sometimes make ourselves smaller for our friends, our family, our employers, our relationships, any one of them. But God is saying, if you are deliberate and are careful to follow my commands and be obedient to all the commands that I give you, then I know that you are making a sacrifice. And because you are making a sacrifice, I am going to place you high above the nations. And he reveals something else about us. He knows that we are transactional beings. He knows that there are many of us, and maybe it's all of us, that are unwilling to give up our independence unless we know that we're going to be getting something out of it, right? He knows that. And I'm comfortable saying that because when he created us in his image. He is the one that is walking around with the manual on humanity. He knows what makes us tick. He knows what we have to give up in order to worship him. He knows that there is nothing that we can hide from him. And because he is able to see us at our most base and at our most raw, he is able to say, hey, if you obey me, and I know that you're making this sacrifice and you are careful to follow my commands, then I am going to bless you. And I'm not just going to be blessing you, I'm going to be placing you above all the peoples on the earth. And he says in verse 3, you will be blessed in the city and in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, and the crops of your land and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed, and you will be blessed when you come out and when you go out. He is saying that you're going to be so blessed that everybody's going to know that you're blessed. And he says, not only are you going to be blessed, I am going to bless your children. And not only am I going to bless your children, I'm going to bless the things that you own, anything that you touch. I'm going to bless you when you go out and when you come in. And we often say this verse without even acknowledging the very first verse that says, if you fully and completely obey the Lord your God and are careful and deliberate in following his commands, then all of these things will be given to you. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. And we see an example of this, and I've talked about him last week. An example of this is David. David, yes, he had his issues, but he learned in his walk, in his humanity, that if he is careful to be obedient to God, then not only would he be blessed, but Solomon was blessed. And even when Solomon at the very end of his life turned away and started worshiping other gods, God did not take away the kingdom from Solomon. He didn't take it away from Solomon. He said, because your dad was so faithful to me, I am going to keep the kingdom in your hands. Now, your children is not going to get it, but you're going to get it. And so it's really important for us to understand that God knows us and obedience is required.